This is your Irish Diary, presenting the romance and reality of Irish life then and now. Áuric Éireann, or Irish Diary, is presented by the Patrick Butler Family Foundation of St. Paul. Professor John McKiernan of the College of St. Thomas in St. Paul is writer and narrator.
These are the arms of Ulster, and it is about Ulster that we shall speak today. Here, the northern province of Ireland is what we call Ulster. 9 counties, some of the most historic, some of the most scenic, some of the most interesting part of Ireland to us as Americans, since so many have come from this part of the country and have risen to prominence in our land. First, however, we have to fly you there, don't we? So we shall fly you to Ireland, where you may for yourselves see what we have to talk about today. And inasmuch as we are talking about Ulster, we ought to begin with Slimish, perhaps. This is where St. Patrick landed, or rather, as a youth, tended sheep on the mountain. For 6 years here, he herded sheep and swine. And a few miles from here are the ruins of the home of the man who was his master. And from there, in our northern county of Antrim, we proceed to Carrickfergus on the north shore of the Belfast Lough, because this is one of the oldest towns in the north. The Fergus, after whom this is named, since the word Carrick in Irish simply means rock, and this means Fergus's rock, was the king, the Irish king of Scotland, from whom the Royal House of Scotland has descended. It's interesting to us to note that off the shores of this fort was fought the first naval battle, that is, in the Revolutionary War. We can see from the walls of this fort as it surveys the town. But out from this fort in the water, John Paul Jones fought and defeated the British vessel, the Drake. And Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson's parents came from this immediate area. But we'll move on a few miles to Ballyhill and look at this very interesting house, which is called, by the way, a bawn, because this was one of the fortified residences used by the English who were settled here in the 17th century. And from here to one of the great wonders of the world, to the Giant's Causeway, 2.5 miles north of the little town of Bushmills. The name might be familiar to you because of their bottled product. But this is one of the world's great geological phenomena. It was formed by the cooling of lava, which burst through the Earth's crust. It extends under the sea, completely under the sea, to the island of Skye in Scotland. And when these rocks cooled, as you note, they formed into prismatic columns, most of which are hexagonal, but not indeed all of them. There are boat trips to very interesting caves just a short distance from the Giant's Causeway itself. Now, the causeway is often given very fanciful names, and if you visit it, you mustn't expect a gigantic mount here or anything of the sort. The interest lies in the very, very regular and peculiar formation of these basaltic rock columns. Where you see that X, for instance, is known as the wishing seat, but these are rather romantic or ridiculous names given to a great, interesting natural phenomena. And not very far from here is the castle of Dunluce. Notice all these Gaelic names like Carrickfergus, Dunluce, and so on. This castle was erected by a Norman about the year 1300, Richard de Bourgo, from whom we get the Irish family Burkes. And then it was taken over by the Macquillans, and then the Macdonalds, and ultimately the O'Neills, and back to the Macdonalds, who made peace with the English, only to suffer a very unfortunate trick, because Sorley boy Macdonnell, who made peace with the English, then had to witness his son taken in treachery when he had invited that same English general to be his guest. But these are the ruins of that romantic castle, perched on the edge, indeed very much on the edge, because in the 17th century a portion of it collapsed while people were living in it, and the servants themselves were precipitated into the sea. And on this same general peninsula we have Portrush. In fact, the name Portrush means peninsula fort. And indeed, it's a lovely place to stay while one is touring around looking at Dunluce and the Giant's Causeway, which you have already seen. This coast, of course, is a sea coast, and here we have White Park Bay, back on the other side of the causeway, one of the most beautiful sandy bays in Northern Ireland. And then we proceed to a place of remarkable beauty, going along the Antrim Coast Road here from Cushendall to Larne, one of the prettiest coastal areas in Ireland. The road winds in and out of bays and little sheltering headlands, with 9 romantic villages in the valleys intersecting the mountain ranges. The paths themselves wander through scenic areas, very quiet, very serene, all of which, of course, mask a rather bloody history of battles fought long ago. The very names of these glens are a musical chorus: Glenarm, Glencloy, Glenurriff, Glenballymun, Glenann, Glencorp, Glendun, Glenchesk, Glentasha. These are what are called the Glens of Antrim, celebrated really in song and story, though of course that's quite a cliche, but nonetheless it is true of these. And then we pass through the town of Larne on our way back to Belfast, and passing through it come to Glynn, a picturesque village in Glencoe. And near this village are the ruins of a church which occupy the site of a patrician settlement. So we proceed from thence into the city of Belfast. This is the Belfast City Hall, and Belfast, as you know, is the second largest city in Ireland, although it is, to all intents and purposes, a rather recent city. That is, it was only in the 19th century that it really developed prodigiously. Its growth in the 19th century was phenomenal, and of course industrial. It is a great industrial city. So that if we leave the city, because to do the city would take a great deal of time, and we're trying to cover most of Northern Ireland to give you a little taste of what you might see there. If we leave the city and through the town of Antrim to this beautiful Loch Ney. Now, 4 of the 9 counties in Ulster, 4 of them border this particular lake, which is the largest freshwater lake in England, Ireland, Scotland, or Wales, the very largest of them all. And it's linked to Belfast by the Lagan Canal. There's a legend about this lake. That is that Finn McCool, that gigantic figure of Irish legend, Finn McCool plucked up a sod from here and tossed it in his anger at another giant in Britain, and that sod fell in the Irish Sea and is now the Isle of Man. But it is an extraordinarily beautiful loch, and the waters of this, according to legend, are supposed to have a petrifying quality. Hawkers used to walk the streets of Belfast saying, "Loch nae hones, put in sticks, taken out stones." And these basket weavers on the shores of the loch are really a very interesting phenomenon in our particular time, that they ply their trade so. There are also hand-operated ferries on this particular loch. So it's an extraordinarily interesting county, that county of Antrim. And we've spent a lot of time on it, more time than perhaps we can spend on any other one of the 9 counties. But it is fascinating, and it is a place that you would love to enjoy. Now, if we move a little to the east and a little bit southerly, easterly, we'll come to another county, the county now of Down, which is one of the most fertile of the counties of Ireland, and a place of quiet beauty such as suggested by this town of Onalong. That might sound like a strange name to you, but it's Gaelic. It means the ford of the ships, and it's very appropriate. You can see the ships there. Onalong is such a beautiful town in the county Down. Lovely, lovely place. Or we may move on in this county to the town of Saul. And here we see a relic of St. Patrick. In fact, the Gaelic word Saul means barn, and it was in a barn here that St. Patrick preached his first sermons. Or we may move on in this county to where the old crafts and traditions are still preserved in these hand-weaving looms in Newtownards. It's a beautiful peninsula. We say Newtown, but in spite of the name, this site dates from about the 13th century. But only a mile and a half away from Newtownards are the ruins of Movilla Abbey, an extraordinary place, founded about the year 540. See how old Irish civilization is. Founded about the year 540 by St. Finian. And this monastery was an important center of Gaelic scholarship. Before there were universities on the continent, there was one here. And one of its most famous sons was St. Columkill, who was a student of St. Finian, and indeed caused a great deal of trouble by his making a copy of one of St. Finian's books. But a part, certainly, that is known to all are the rock carvings there that still remain in the ruins of this particular abbey. So that if one is in County Down and has a flair at all for the past, he would certainly not want to miss Movilla. Now we go to the Mountains of Mourne. I'm sure that all of us have heard of the Mountains of Mourne, one of the most beautiful mountain ranges in Northern Ireland. Perhaps only Donegal has anything to compete with this. There are numerous peaks here, granite generally. There's good hiking. There are good horse trails. Notice the interesting Irish gate posts, by the way. There is good motoring, actually. You might be frightened away by the thoughts of it in these mountains, but really you will find hiking, motoring, and so on. Slieve Donard is the highest of the peaks here. It's named after a saint of the 5th century who had an oratory on the top of the mountains there. And in Newcastle, at the foot of these, you have now a memorial to Percy French, who was the writer of that song, The Mountains of Mourne. So this little attention that the mountains have got throughout the world are owing to him. Well, we have done Antrim and Down quite hurriedly in this flying trip, and now I think it's only proper that we go to Armagh, which is the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland and a place of great antiquity, because the city originally existed in the centuries before Christ as a fort erected to the goddess Macha. So Ord Macha, or Armagh in English, is our next stop. It is the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland. And here we see a view a bit too distant, I'm afraid, to give you a great deal of help. But if you notice the spires, the twin spires now are the Catholic cathedral, and the more solid tower, the chunkier tower, is the Protestant cathedral. And these are respectively the centers of Christianity in Ireland, of Catholic Christianity, of Protestant Christianity. St. Patrick founded the city, no doubt to take away from the ruins of the goddess Macha. There's a very lovely poem left to us about Armagh. It was written by Alfred, a prince, a Saxon prince, king of the Northumbrian Scots, who in the year 684 wrote about his itinerary through Ireland. And he wrote, "I found in Armagh the splendid, meekness, wisdom, and prudence blended." Well, we move from there to the observatory. The observatory at Armagh was established in 1798, which is quite old for us Americans. But the thing that's interesting about it is that it is participating today in these astronautical studies that are going on between Harvard and Dunsink, and in a minor way with the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies. And while we're still in Armagh, we go to this lovely house, Derrymore House, near the town of Bessbrook, the sole survivor of one of those small thatched mansions that were very much in vogue at one time amongst the Irish gentry. And in this particular house, the Act of Union was drafted. Well, we continue our journey, and we leave Armagh and come to the lovely county of Monaghan, the seat of the McMahon family, which is a county of undulating surface with a great many small lakes like this, attractive to fishermen. And we drop to the south a little to the county Cavan, a fisherman's paradise, the county in general. This is the most southerly of the Ulster counties, and in its mountains the Shannon River rises, which is the longest river in the United Kingdom or Ireland. And this town, Cavan, was the seat of the O'Reillys, but here we have a town, Ballyjamesduff, which has been celebrated in song. Come back to Ballyjamesduff. But more importantly, you would be interested in knowing that this was the town that William James migrated from in 1789 to come to the United States. He didn't come back to Ballyjamesduff, and because he didn't, he gave two great names to American humanities: William James, the philosopher-psychologist, and Henry James, the great author. So we'll turn now north to the lake country of the north, to County Fermanagh, the Maguire County. This is the lakeland of Northern Ireland, a beautiful long stretch of the Erne, Loch Erne, the Lake Erne from the River Erne. And it is this beautiful loch which James Clarence Mangan made an immortal reference to in his poem Dark Rosaleen, when he says, speaking of his devotion to Ireland and his desire to fight for her, he says, "The Erne shall run red with redundance of blood." Well, now, if the Erne were to run red, indeed, the redundance of blood would have to be very, very great. One of the famous towns along this Lough Erne is the island town of Enniskillen. This town is really an island with the Erne flowing on both sides of it. And there are left, really, and only rubble, but the foundations of a 15th century castle of the Maguires, because this is Maguire country. And right out from that town, in the Erne, we have this lovely island, Devonish, which again, you know, the mountaintops and the islands were really devoted to sanctification in the old days. And there was a monastery here, St. Mulasha. And we have these curious carved figures which remain as part of the ruins of that monastery. And also, at the other end of that loch from Enniskillen, we have the Belleek China factory in this lovely countryside, the factory itself right on the edge of the river, where is made the exquisite Irish porcelain, which we call Belleek, after the name of the town in which it is made. Now, if we go to the next county northward, we come to Tyrone. This is the home of the O'Neills and one of the last places in Ireland to submit to British rule. It's typically a hilly county. And this is the picture of the Sperrin Mountains and the North Tyrone countryside. But we are interested, perhaps as Americans, in this particular printing shop in Strabane in the County Tyrone, because here worked the printer of the American Declaration of Independence, John Dunlap. Well, if we leave this county, as we must do a great deal of leaving, and go to the County Derry, or Londonderry, as it is often called in Northern Ireland. Not always, but often. So here is the city of Derry on the beautiful Foyle River, the ancient family seat of the O'Kane family, but better known to us perhaps because of its associations with Columkill. And here is the Guild Hall rising behind the famous walls of Derry. And this is the city, as I say, that we associate with St. Columkill. He founded it in the year 546. The city, of course, was not then what it is now. It withstood a siege in 1689 of 105 days. The wall surrounding the city is pierced by several of these gates. Now, this is not one of the original gates, but this one dates from 1789. And on the top of those walls today reposes this famous cannon, Roaring Meg, when the Irish attacking army was beaten back after the unsuccessful and prolonged siege. And now we move into the County Donegal, which we might call perhaps the Queen of the North. It's a place of extraordinary beauty and desolation. It's the northernmost county in Ireland. Its beauties and antiquities must really be experienced firsthand. It's a county associated with great names like McSweeney and O'Doherty. And here we have the Tranrossan Bay, where the waters of the Atlantic pound in, creating a furious scene. And then the quieter scene of Glen Lake, for instance. Beautiful, attractive, serene, lovely to behold in all senses. But then we move to some of the treasures associated with Columkill, for instance. This in Glen Columkill is the record of Columba taking instruction. But if we observe carefully, we can see here the mountain valleys that one comes upon with great frequency in this particular county. And it is these valleys and these mountains and this combination of sea that really lend the otherworldly atmosphere to Donegal. There are, for instance, desolate glens between these mountains where one may travel for hours without really encountering a soul. There are, too, lonesome farmhouses which rear evidently a sturdy and self-reliant folk. There are also, to return to our associations with Columkill, ancient rocks with carvings that are centuries and centuries old. This particular part of the woods, should we say, is devoted to Columkill and to the modern men who come in his footsteps, the fishermen of the days. This is the town of Killybegs. Killybegs, by the way, is Gaelic for little churches, and here is part of the famous Killybeg fishing fleet. Wherever you go, here, for instance, in Lake Garton, which is the birthplace, not the lake now, but the surrounding countryside, and indeed not even the surrounding, but this is the countryside in which Columkill was born. And we return again to remind you of it in this rock sculpture which records for posterity the name of Columkill, or his Latin name, Columba. And here is a wayside shrine which keeps alive the devotion to Columba in country places. And, of course, no trip to Donegal would be complete without a reference to that internationally known place of pilgrimage, Loch Derg. But I think the trademark of Donegal is Mount Errigal, this extraordinarily fascinating mountain which dominates the landscape. I think anyone seeing Errigal will never forget it, no matter what time of the day or the night. In the evening, for instance, the last rays of the sun may just strike on the top of this mountain when all else is in darkness. This, then, has been our trip through the north of Ireland, through the province of Ulster, 9 counties, each different in its own way, and containing not only scenic beauties, but antiquities, shall we say, modern appeals of tourist nature, and also fishing and whatnot. But I couldn't leave without giving you a little bit of information about that great man of the north, St. Columkill. You saw the ruins of the abbey that he established, or in which rather he was a student of St. Finian. And he made a copy. This was the first copyright battle in the world. He made a copy of St. Finian, his instructor, of St. Finian's Psalter, and without St. Finian's permission. And books those days were worth their weight in radium. And St. Finian protested. The case went before the king. The king decided against Columkill with that famous decision in Irish history, "To every cow belongs her calf." And that was the decision in the first copyright battle.
If you would like a list of selected readings to add to your enjoyment, please send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Professor John McKiernan, College of St. Thomas, St. Paul, Minnesota. This program has been presented as a public service by the Patrick Butler Family Foundation and produced at KTCA-TV, Minneapolis, St. Paul.